Hey, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. It's been a hot minute since we've been here, but we are back. I am Ron Luce, joined tonight by the one and only Juice and the one and only Cody Delmendo. Gentlemen, how are we doing now that Cubs baseball has come and gone? We can breathe and we can reflect on the 2021 season. How's everybody doing? No one wants to go first. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll go first. Ron, I'm just glad we didn't lose 100 games, I guess. It was a roller coaster. You know, they always say that it's a roller coaster. It really was a roller coaster this year. Not the worst Cubs season of my life, but maybe one of the most memorable. I think in 10 years, we're going to look back at this season and still remember it and remember the trade deadline and remember, you know, like we're going to be talking about Andrew Chafin in 10 years still. We'll be like Cubs legend, you know what I mean? And we'll be talking about, you know, the Kimbrel trade if Nick Madrigal turns out to be great, you know, and even Cody Hoyer. We'll be talking about Frank Schwindel if he's either with the team or if he's, you know, just that, you know, just a half season wonder. I don't know. We can talk a lot more about him here soon, but yeah, I think there's a lot of things that we'll remember in 10 years even. And I think that's a little bit unique. But all things considered, it was not fun. The best time of the entire season was definitely between May and June, somewhere in there. And then before that, it sucked. After that, it sucked. It was kind of fun at the beginning of September where they kind of got hot for a little bit, won like 7 in a row. But, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't know. I'm just glad it's over. You know, we love the Cubs here, and I can't tell you how ready I was for the season to just be over because it's like I couldn't even like find a reason to tweet about him anymore. Like when I can't even find a reason to tweet about him, like I feel like that says something. I mean, I was resulting to just finding any way to shit on the Cardinals for the last 2 weeks, which has come back to haunt me. I'm surprised people aren't just like quote tweeting me with old screenshots or something, like with receipts or something. It is what it is. I'm just saying, though.
I mean, but you gotta continually remind people, Cody, that Patrick Wisdom was traded for effectively a washing machine.
He was, though. He really was.
Washing machine a little bit too much for the return, I think. I think it was more like a bag of chips that were stepped on, probably popped and expired. But, I mean, here nor there.
Yeah.
Something like that. Juice, how are you feeling, sir, now that the season has come and gone, as Cody put it truly perfectly and poetically, the roller coaster ride that was?
Yeah, you know, he always talks about that roller coaster. We all do. We sit here and first let me start and just thank all the listeners for the year. I think Absolutely. We take a lot of time to do this, and the fact that people enjoy it and they tune in every night to hear what we have to say, even though we're not sitting in there in the dugout with these guys or, you know, have a personal relationship is pretty cool. I want to thank all you guys too. I think it was pretty fun to sit here and have legit conversations in a time where it seems like conversations aren't able to be had around the world. I don't know if you're able to look around you, but yeah, it's hard to sit here and like, we never like have the same opinion, right? All of us are always kind of in a different realm, but we always have fun with it. You know, I think this is cool to like be able to sit here and do this here nor there. Now let's go into the Cubs. I'd feel a lot better about, you know, what transpired if Matt Nagy wasn't also giving me heartburn on the back end, but that's here nor there. That also doesn't compute. So like sticking around at the end of the year was, like Cody said, it was tough. Absolutely hard to watch Cubs games. I can only imagine what it was like in the dugout, you know, just to sit there and like know that you're realistically playing for nothing. They were trying to play spoiler to a lot of these teams, but let's be honest, like there's no risk. You know what I mean? It's when you're playing spoiler, if you win, it's like found money. It's like playing with house money. So, I mean, I don't know, man. Like it was fun, definitely in that little span of whatever month and a half. But
yeah,
I got a funny feeling like transitioning kind of into the offseason, which we'll talk about a lot, that a level of Cubs anger was met during the year, and it will be just totally just blown away if they are unable to turn this around quickly. Because I think that they haven't sold this as a breakdown for full rebuild. If you listen to the way they talk, they're more or less saying that there are things we can do to be back into contention as soon as next year, which, hey, I love the aggressive push, but they're also hedging their bet behind their words as well. If you listen to Jed Hoyer and how he's like, yeah, we're going to be really active in free agency, but we're also going to spend smart money. And that's his out. At the end of the year, he can come and say, we didn't get this guy because it was too much, or we didn't feel like he fit our system for that amount of dollars, which I think like the season, we're going to sit back and look and say, yeah, this was brutal to watch. But if they don't come back with a huge name or two to reset this whole thing, I think that the backlash that the Cubs will receive will be 10 times the amount than when they traded mainstays of the team. Because the first thing is you trade these guys and you restart. The second thing is now you got to surround those guys with the same kind of talent that you surrounded the first group with. Mm-hmm. And if you take off an off season, then you're putting yourself behind the 8-ball for another year. And it's another year that Southside team keeps making the playoffs, and the swirls and rumors around you that you are unable as an ownership group and as a leadership team to fill those stands with a good baseball team. That's what boils the pot over. So everybody yelled at the Ricketts throughout the year. You traded this guy, this guy, this guy. Pause for now for yelling at the team until we see what they do in free agency. Because if they don't do anything, a guy who did not yell very loud at the Ricketts, will be the one yelling and screaming, because there is no reason not to at least make a few splashes.
Yeah. And Joe couldn't be with us tonight, another one of the four mainstays here at Cubs on Tap, but he did send us some of his thoughts kind of ahead of time. And I think Joe and you, Juice, can kind of align on one thing, and that's like, hey, you don't need to try and go be the Yankees this offseason, right? You don't need to go buy everybody. Buy a couple people that you really truly see 2, 3, 4 years from now being a part of this team when it's competing, right? Like, to me, again, am I being biased? Perhaps a little bit. Like, Marcus Stroman is a pitcher that fits well for Wrigley. He's a ground ball pitcher. He's very athletic. He's a good defensive pitcher as well. He's won a Gold Glove. So that's the kind of guy that we've seen thrive with the Cubs, right? We've seen a Kyle Hendricks thrive in Chicago. We've seen Alec Mills at times show incredible flashes of potential. And realistically, he's probably your fifth starter in 2022 at minimum. Plus, he's super cheap too, which helps. And I agree with you, Juice. I really do think they need to do something. I don't think they need to go above and beyond and go crazy, but they need to do something, right? Because right now I look at this team and kind of what you said, right? Those guys for the next wave. Well, to me right now, looking at this team, I see Brennan Davis probably in that picture. I see Nick Madrigal in that picture. Probably Nico Horner in that picture. Probably Wilson Contreras, all things considered. And that's really about it right now, I think, on this roster. That I can comfortably sit here and say, I think post-2022, they'll still be here.
I think for the back end that Ian Happ had, he's probably pretty safe, considering the options that are in left field.
Sure. But I mean, I'm saying more from kind of what you said, right? Like that next core. Right.
Yeah, I think Ian's going to get a shot to still be a part of that, though, based on his. Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's one that you could still kind of hang on, just strictly because of the amount of money he'll make next year. And I mean, it's worth another. Let's be honest here, guys. They're going to try to compete, but they're probably going to be closer to 500, even if they make splashes in free agency and pull all the right, strings.
Right.
There's probably still going to be a 500 baseball team at best next year. That's my opinion.
Oh, sure.
And because they're still going to be behind on pitching. And other than Marcus Stroman, that's the move to me too. I agree with you on that. But minus that, there's not really anything that jumps out of the page like, need that guy, in my opinion.
I would argue maybe Robbie Ray. That's a guy that a lot of people have been sprinkling into the limelight that I actually like. I kind of forgot too that he's still really Yeah, I think he'll be 30 at the start of next season.
Yeah.
So like he's still, and he's a
Another
lefty.
one I'd be okay with.
Right. But outside of those two, I absolutely agree with you. Like, because they're also still kind of young enough where I say, okay, I can still see them pitching on this team in 4 years when, Christian Hernandez or Ed Howard or somebody like that's at shortstop, when you got guys like Ryan Jensen are probably going to be in the rotation. Like when those guys start to come along, like I'm expecting one of those two guys could be here come that time. Really quick, because I want to continue this conversation because I know, Cody, you're going to have some good thoughts on kind of some of these topics as well. I do want to share a loyal listener this year, Juice, you mentioned to people that tuned in all the time. Scott from Iowa, Scott Crawford, diehard listener. We appreciate the hell out of you, Scott. We've appreciated you all season. Wanted to share his best moments of the year. The Cubs combined no-hitter was pretty sweet. Wisdom breaking the home run record, I think, was a very big, a bright spot in this season. And then, yes, Cody demolishing a bottle of mayo. Hey, but Cody, in fairness, that started the run in May and June of the Cubs' ascension. So, like, at that moment in time, that was a very monumental part of the season.
I don't want to know what the Cubs record is since I inhaled a bottle of mayonnaise. I was able to run with that for like a good month and a half
at least.
Yeah, you were on fire for a while there.
I'm surprised like all the people who hate the Cubs that follow me or whatever haven't like used that, and like I don't know, just like Twitter can be a very, very meme place. Like
I think it's always a meme place. That's just me.
Yeah. I'm surprised no one like there's a lot of bad tweets out there from me. Like I was like in May, I was like, this team they got the major league role, like they're just defying ownership in the front office and they're just like having fun and finding ways to win, and then they shit their pants after they threw a combined no hitter. So yeah, you guys said a lot of good things though. I mean, and thanks to Scott, he's always, like you said, Ron, he's always listening. I want to shout out to Dope Redbeard, aka Aaron. Shout out to Baseball Bouge. Shout out to the Dingers podcast. I know some other guys watch our shows too. There's so many other people. I'm just think those are like the ones off the top of my head. But yeah, I mean, like I said, there was a lot of really cool moments I feel like we'll remember even 5 years down the line, but it's just at the end of the day, it's a season that you want to forget because the trade deadline was terrible in terms of just how it felt. Not saying the trades were bad. I'm saying just like, what I mean by that. It's just heartbreaking stuff.
Your heart being ripped from your chest.
Right. As far as like what Juice said about like, making moves in the off season and stuff, and like, because I'm kind of in line with him. Like even since they decided to rip the Band-Aid off, and at that point, like I was on board with it because it's like, all right, we're 10, 11 games out of first place. At that time, it seemed like the wild card was going to be ran away with the Dodgers and the Padres. And fuck the Padres for letting the Cardinals look like a fucking Cinderella team. Fuck them. But at that time, yeah, except for you, Darf, I still love you. But at that time, it just felt like there was no way the Cubs were going to have a chance even at the wild card. So it was right to make the moves, even though on the day of the trade deadline, I had some slimmer of hope that, especially with that last half hour where Chris Bryant was was still on the roster, and even like in the last 15 minutes, he was still on the roster. Yeah. And I was thinking, maybe they're just going to extend him. I really got up for the letdown on that one. And then they trade him. It is what it is. But as far as like, doing what you say, like, I think there's a fine line on like what kind of moves. Like, I feel like the Cubs need to go out and make moves like they did in 2015 or like the 2015 or the offseason before the 2015 season. So I guess the 2014 offseason where they signed John Lester, they traded for Dexter Fowler, they traded for Miguel Montero, threw in a bunch of other moves. And then they had surprises out of, the bullpen. Like Justin Graham came up and had like his one really great season in 2015, like they're going to need stuff like that. If the 2015 or if the 2022 team is going to, be in the running for division or wild card, like, cause I would say like, go spend all the money if this team was just set up to, go on a run next year. but they're not because they still have guys in the minors who aren't ready, except for Brennan Davis. Brennan Davis, if they get the CBA figured out in the offseason right away, which if baseball is smart, if the MLB is smart, they get that shit done right away. That way they can get free agency going at the winter meetings as soon as the World Series is done. If there's one smart thing that they would ever do is to do that. Not like let this go on and let the free agency not start until like a month before spring training, and God forbid there be a strike if that's a thing. You know what I mean? So like that's the big thing first, is to get that figured out. And hopefully, you know, the DH is going to be a thing, and hopefully they get rid of that second runner on second base rule. I know people are in or out. I don't know. And if they're going to keep that, then they need to limit the shifts. If I had to choose one of those two, you got to fix one of them, because having unlimited shifts and the runner on second base rule in extra innings just gives me heartburn. But I'm kind of zoning off here. But as you know, as far as like moves and stuff, yeah, I'm in on Stroman. I would love Castellanos to come back because he's going to opt out, no doubt, and he's going to get $25 million. I'm interested to see what Schwarber, Bryant, and Rizzo do in the postseason. You know, obviously Schwarber or Rizzo, one of them will have a short postseason because they're going to play each other tomorrow. But, you know, I feel like players they'll get that extra little tip in the free agency if they just have a huge postseason, especially if they've consistently been good throughout the year. So I feel like Anthony Rendon's like a good example. I thought he was a really good player in 2019. But he had an insane postseason as well, and that led to him getting like a $300 million contract. Chris Bryant would have to have an insane postseason for him to get that, like a $300 million contract. Because even after the Cubs trade him, he was good, but he wasn't MVP Chris Bryant. He was just very solid, you know. Mm-hmm. So I'm interested to see if like any of them have something like that, because that will affect their free agent, you know, market in the long run. But not so much. It's just a little bit, because at the end of the day, teams are looking at what you're doing over a span of 162 more so than what you're doing in the postseason. But yeah, no, I just if I'm with you, Juice, like if they don't make a major move, then it's going to be hard to lay with the people who are continuously yelling at Tom Ricketts. And I've been someone who's been yelling at Tom Ricketts, because like we should have never got here. We should have extended Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo and Javi Baez years ago. You know what I mean? Or at least two of them. We should have done it. And that's why the reason this season happened, it just goes back to Tom Ricketts, in my opinion. But then you can also argue, you know, we paid Yu Darvish all that money. Jason Hayward's contract, you know, didn't loom large in 16, 17, and 18. But after that, it's loomed large. And like, that is what it is. So part of me is like understanding, but also at the same time, the Cubs are a top 5 market baseball team, and they should be able to deal with Jason Hayward's contract and still, you know, put a consistently competitive product out there. That's just what, like, that's the fact of the matter. And that's where I can understand where Cubs fans just have no faith in Tom Ricketts. That's what I'll always understand. So, you know, like there's a lot of questions, and it's going to look real bad after Tom Ricketts literally went on marquee and was like, I expect us to be in the division race next year, like competing for it. He literally went on marquee not even a week after the trade deadline and said that. You know, and we all remember everything Jed said on ESPN 1000 and 670 The Score, and, you know, basically throwing shots back at Brian and Rizzo. It is what it is. At the end of the day, money talks. You know, I don't think those two players have any ill will at the Cubs, especially Chris Bryant. Maybe Anthony Rizzo. I don't fucking know. Either way, though, like, once those guys see what their market is on the market, maybe, who knows, maybe that will open their eyes, and maybe the Cubs weren't off. Like, maybe they weren't far off it. It's going to take the team that's going to just be willing to pay them the most. Like, Anthony Rizzo wants the Paul Goldschmidt contract. All right, who's going to give it to him? I don't think the Cubs should give it to him. I know he's been okay and with the Yankees, but he hasn't been Paul Goldschmidt level. That's the fact of the matter. Chris Bryant, I just said he's not a $300 million player. He never said he never asked for $300 million. There was always rumors, but there was never any factual basis that said he wanted that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like it's like that entire situation with Bryant. It's very disturbing to me because it just reminds me so much of, you know, if we're going to use another Chicago player like Derrick Rose, like he was forced out by the media and he was forced out by the fans because he wasn't living up to a contract after all those injuries. And you know how Chicago fans are. We expect so much right away. He put the whole entire city on his back. And I always blame Gar Pax for not fucking fixing everything. They just always assumed that he was going to get back to the MVP level, and he just never did. So, and it's kind of like the same thing with Chris Bryant to me, because Chris Bryant did everything right. Like he never said anything wrong. He's quite literally like any team will be happy to have him. I will always believe that. I will always believe that. And you know, he just maybe our expectations for him are higher than they should be. Maybe he did peak in 2017, you know, 2016, 2017. And maybe he'll never be another 7 WAR player again. But I'll take a solid 4 to 5 WAR player for 5 years and pay him anywhere between $20 and $25 million while he can still play the outfield or third base or first base. Like any team would love to have that. You know what I mean?
Especially because that's what you thought you were getting in the Jason Hayward contract, effectively.
Right. And so, like, that's just kind of my thoughts on those guys as far as any of them potentially coming back. Maybe Javi Baez actually is the most, like, maybe, like, he would be the one. With the way that Jed's building the team now, I just don't know if Javi is the guy that he wants to bring back, because I don't know if you guys saw what I tweeted the other day during one of the, I think it was the last game against the Pirates, but they showed a graphic of the Cubs offense before the trade deadline and after it. And the offensive numbers were all better in the second half. It's because they're not striking out nearly as much. It also helps that Frank Schwindel just became Superman. I don't understand it, but whatever. Jed Hoyer is going to put out a contact first lineup. He is going to do that. He's going to need to go find power, and maybe Frank Schwindel is that guy, and maybe Patrick Wisdom is that guy. But you can't tell me that those two guys are to be the ones in 3-4 in your lineup in 2022 and expect them to go win 85 to 90 games. There's just no way. They can be very complimentary in your lineup, no doubt, but you definitely need to go get some guys who have proven it for 162 for multiple years that are within reasonable age and not on the back end of their career. Like that, that's the thing with the offense, at least. I'm not saying that the offense was better without Bryant, Rizzo, and Baez, but the way that they were able to score runs was definitely a lot more fun to watch than it was with those other 3 guys, because of how the lineup was built. It wasn't diversified. It was definitely a lot more diversified after the trade deadline, no matter what anyone wants to say. Everyone wants to talk about stats in baseball. These are the stats. They're just simply the facts. I'm sorry if that offends people. So, yeah. I'm
Cody,
talking a lot. So
for that reason is exactly why, if I'm Jed Hoyer, I don't care about the lineup right now. The reason they lost this year is because they couldn't pitch. Let's be honest here, guys.
You're right.
They couldn't pitch. Agree. When they won in 2016, they were good at 2 things. They could pitch, and they could create balls in play and outs. They were one of the best defensive teams in 2016.
True.
The lineup, as much as everybody wants to throw their hands in the air and hit home runs, and it takes you far, the best teams in baseball, the teams that contend always, they pitch and they field. Because no matter what you do on a given day, you can always pitch and you can always field. Hitting is going to come and go. So if I'm Jed Hoyer, I'm doing whatever I can to bring pitchers in here. I could care less about this lineup because, as you said, you had all those stars in that lineup in the first half, and you outperformed it with guys who are no names next to, on 1 year contracts. I'm not going to say that that's a recipe for success. Don't take that like the wrong way, that I think that they should not get anybody for the lineup. But with that said, focus needs to be pitching. They just couldn't pitch, and that was when they traded you Darvish and they brought in all these guys. We talked about it the very first episode. The Cubs pitching staff is a pitching experiment for the year. They did not have guys who strike out guys.
Mm-hmm.
It was all contact and play, and it was a failed experiment. So failed.
Mm-hmm.
It is clear that if you're looking anywhere to add on this team, you need guys who can punch them out. And that, I mean, starters who start this game and can mow through hitters. That's what the game is now, guys. And as much as I would love to see Rizzo, Bryant, Schwarber, all these guys come back. If they take that money and they spend it on pitching instead, and they do minimal things to the lineup, I think I'll be a happy Cub fan at the end of the offseason. I think I'll be happy with that.
Yeah, and kind of to add on to what you said, Juice, I think that's kind of where I think at times we've talked about it here on this show amongst our whole group variously, sporadically on episodes because we've talked about the idea of adding a Nick Castellanos to this lineup as your power guy. Because at the end of the day, even if you only add one significant bat, so let's say you go get that big bat in Castellanos, and then maybe you get a middle of the pack kind of bat, right? Like a guy that maybe can come in, maybe he plays a little third base, maybe
or if Brendan Davis just comes up and is Brendan Davis.
Sure, absolutely. And that's kind of what we've talked about, right? Is like realistically the top 5 guys in your lineup could potentially be Madrigal, Horner, maybe Frank Schwindel hitting in like a 2-hole or even like a 5-hole. But then you put in Castellanos and Davis, and all of a sudden that lineup doesn't look too terrible. Especially
you can look at 6 if you're looking at Wilson Contreras at 6 too.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like that's still a pretty damn good lineup that is very diversified because you have guys that can hit for high contact, you have guys that can hit for some power, and you have these guys that can kind of do a little bit of both. Like Schwindel can hit for some power, but he's a really good just hitter. He's just a good pure hitter. Like he doesn't walk a ton. He walks a little bit, but he doesn't walk a ton. Like his averages and his on base are closer than his on base and his slugging are. If you look at the numbers in September alone, speaking of one NL Rookie of the Month, second month in a row, Frank Schwindel. But he I think he slashed 357, 405, 605 in the month of September. And the only reason I know that is because I wrote the article today. But again, all the dude does is hit. And that's fantastic because you have Horner's a guy who's shown he has the potential to hit potentially around 300. Madrigal has never hit under 300 in the big leagues. So now all of a sudden you have that diversified lineup, right? And then you talk about defense. Horner's a great glove, was a Gold Glove finalist in 2020, even though his bat was horrible. Madrigal's a solid glove. Wisdom played a mean third base. We always talked so highly of his defense. Schwindel was good enough at first. And then you have maybe again Davis has shown he's a very good defensive outfielder. So and Willie's a very good defensive catcher. So maybe you have 1 or 2 guys on your roster that are defensive liabilities, but overall, you throw that money at the pitching. Maybe you go get a Robbie Ray. Maybe you go get a Marcus Stroman. You go get a bullpen arm or 2 that are established. Now all of a sudden, you're looking at a lineup potentially with guys like Stroman, Hendricks, Ray. Again, there's certainly some uncertainty. I know Joe was very against the idea of loading up too much because he wants to see guys like Steele and Alzolay get opportunities to start, and that's great. But they can probably still start with Mills in the mix if you still add 2 guys. I think they can make that work somehow. And even if they have to go up and down between AAA maybe for a little bit to get starts. They got to do something though, because I agree with you, Juice. They couldn't pitch to save their lives. How many games did we see when the Cubs scored? Didn't it happen? It happened twice this year. They scored 7 runs and had a 7-run lead and lost by more than 7 runs in 2 games. That's the first time in Major League history that's ever happened twice in a season to the same team.
And one of those games that happened to Kyle Hendricks, which was so I didn't see it coming.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking of Kyle Hendricks, I've seen some tweets where people are like, maybe you throw him out there as trade bait in the offseason. And I mean, he's on such a good contract. Maybe the Cubs could get some really good prospects back. Perhaps you can get one that's ready. I don't know. I don't know what his market would be because if you look at the numbers, this is his worst season since 2015, no doubt. But a lot of that has to do with an inflated September. But from May through August, he was solid. Not even solid. He every 5th day in August, you're like, all right, well, we got a chance to win today because Kyle was pitching. You know what I mean? But I don't know because he's not the strikeout guy, right? Like he only throws 89. But you watch him, and when he's on, man, you just he's one of the unique ones. He's a unicorn out there in this day and age. And he's got the postseason experience where he's been very good. I'm not saying I want the Cubs to do it. I'm just saying that that's an option. I feel like, especially if the Cubs really do want to go with this full on, like, let's get some strikeout guys out there, blah, 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 because that's what the rest of the league is doing. I do think that it really doesn't matter for Kyle Hendricks because he's just, like I said, he's different. He's built different, but like I think that's something to consider. I know Contreras is something, with the contract ending after next season. I've been on board to give him a contract extension, and we've talked about contract extensions in the Cubs for fucking years, and things didn't happen. But I think Wilson Contreras could be a little bit different because he is a catcher and he's not going to cost you more than what's his name? Yasmani Grandal got $80 million from the White Sox. There's no way Wilson Contreras is going to get that. Like, he's one of the best catchers in the league, but Yasmani Grandal might be top 2. I would say Contreras is at least top 7. Last year, 2019, I think you could argue he was, top 5 at least. And my thing with Contreras is I think he can be a top 3 catcher if he just isn't leading the leagues in innings caught every season.
Yeah.
I think another thing the Cubs need to do is get another backup catcher. In 2016, they had 3 catchers. It was Contreras, Ross, and Montero.
4 if you really wanted to count Schwarber too at the end.
Yeah, sure.
On the road roster.
Like, you got Robinson Chirinos, who's like on his last leg. He's like 39. I guess he could be your David Ross next year. Maybe there's someone out there that, like, he has caught his entire career. I have no idea. But all I'm saying is that they need to get another backup catcher. If they want to keep Chirinos, that's fine with me because he can hit a little bit. But you can't use him as your backup twice a week. He's a 1 day a week guy at this point in his career. You need to go get another one to just kind of mix in with it. That way Contreras isn't, putting on the catcher's gear, 5 out of 7 days a week. I think you need, at this point, if you want to get the offensive production for a full season from him, you gotta put him in the catcher's gear for maybe 3 or 4 days a week. And hopefully if the DH is a thing, you can use him in the DH in those other days and let someone else catch. Like, I really do think that's a thing that they need to do. And no one's really talking about that. So I think you should keep that in mind, people who are listening. But yeah, no, it's I forgot what I was going to say.
No, but I got a good point, though, to kind of piggyback on what you said, though, about the catchers. Because I think back, right, obviously 2016, 2015, you had Miguel Montero, you had Ross, Willie came up, right? You had that really nice stable of 3 catchers at that time that showed they could all hit and they could all, Willie was still learning in terms of behind the plate, but he had the arm.
People were like begging for Contreras to come up in 16 because Montero was in the midst of a really bad season offensively. And he couldn't throw anyone out because he was older. And David Ross was only catching against, or he was only catching for John Lester, right? So yeah, Contreras, his call up was. I mean, they didn't make that until July, but the team was so far ahead in the standings that they could afford to do that. Right. They're not going to be in that position next season. No. So
and there's no guarantee that a guy like Miguel Amaya is ready because he was hurt all year this year.
Yeah, and even if you're bringing him up to play, not to sit. So that's why Miguel Amaya is going to sit in Double-A or Triple-A again this year and at least get ready again. I agree with you. I think it's hard.
It sucks that Amaya was out all season basically because he missed
and the year before.
He's now 2 years with no development, and it's so frustrating because it would have made sense if he would have been ready and the Cubs moved Victor Caratini in the Yu Darvish trade. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And now they Victor. I know Victor Caratini had a bad season with the Padres, but when you're in the role that he was with the Cubs, you can be okay with that. You know what I mean?
Right.
Perhaps maybe he is just a backup catcher. maybe he does. He can't be a everyday guy. I don't know if he started every day or not, but you know what I mean by that. Like he definitely played a lot more with the Padres than he did with the Cubs. So
for sure.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just tough. I do think that's something that no one's really talking about though, and the Cubs need to get that figured out because that position is very crucial to not just offense but defense as well.
Especially in the NL, right? I mean, it makes so much more sense in the NL than it does. Not to badmouth the AL or anything like that, but no, and to go back to like your Kyle Hendricks talk, I think it's really hard to sit and trade him now from a position of need, opposed to, and what does that send to your fan base? You know,
right?
If
he's making like no money, and then
well, not even just that. It's like if you're truly trying to turn it around so quickly, if you trade Kyle Hendricks, it's almost like an announcement to the team and to the fans. I don't think we're going to be contending for the next 3 years. And I really do think Marcus Stroman adding with Kyle Hendricks and maybe that next 3 that you've talked about, you know, Keegan Thompson, Justin Steele, Mills, and then you just see where this team is next year, right? If you got to add at the trade deadline, that's the other thing. They have so much draft capital now in terms of, you know, your minor league pipeline that if you want to go out and make a splash for a big name, you can do that, you know? Do I think that they're going to be in that position? No, I said they're a 500 baseball team next year, but I don't know. It is what
Kyle
it
Hendricks
is.
for Zach Collins juice.
Yeah, I know. Is that buzz in there?
It is. Buzz.
Yeah.
It is. Buzz.
He's trying to jump in real quick because he actually told me I don't get the off work like you guys are going to get. Maybe I know you still do your podcast and you're with Four Feathers, so all 3 of us will still be on the mic. I'm actually going to be jumping in and helping with the Bulls a little bit.
Hey.
Which would be kind of fun. Buzz and I both have season tickets, so he's probably trying to butt in. That way he gets a little bit of banter with me to warm back up. But yeah, no. Also, Buzz, your team's about to play in the playoffs. Why are you jumping in like a Cubs stream over here? Like I'd be watching like all those White Sox hype videos for the postseason, and you know, like maybe making sure that there's no trash cans within the Houston Astros dugout. You know, I'd be flying down there to make sure, you know, there's no buzzers. There's no trash cans, you know, things like that. You make sure you got an even playing field when you walk in there.
No, we do appreciate Buzz jumping into the comments and having fun with us here. But you know, Cody, going again, because I really agree with you about the whole catcher thing because, you know, 2016 aside, their best season in terms of catching depth to me was when they went and got Alex Avila at the deadline.
Yes.
And look how much that paid off. Because Willie got hurt, and he took over as the primary catcher and did a great job because he could hit. He called a good game. Like that is super important. I agree with you. I think, and that kind of plays in with the pitching, right? Like you need another good, you know, second catcher that can come in and catch your entire pitching staff. And I think that's incredibly important. And you know, but I really do agree. Like, I think the pitching is just such a big thing. And I think they found that they can make bullpen arms, right? I think we saw that with guys this year that, you know, they improved. I mean, no slander toward any of these guys because I love them all. But, like, look how much better Ryan Tepera and Andrew Chafin were with the Cubs. Now, granted, they both have continued that since leaving. But, like, them working with the pitching lab and things like that, how much that helped them develop in their careers. Totally think that's possible, you know, for the Cubs to continue to do that with some guys. And maybe they go after some guys in free agency that are like, again, kind of the Cubs model of guy that like, hey, he's got a lot of upside, but he just needs a little tinkering. We're going to go sign him for $1 million and then
why
turn
do I
him
always
into
think
something
of Trevor Cahill when anybody ever says that?
Because you look like Trevor Cahill.
I do kind of look like Trevor Cahill. I got the fat face, man. I'll admit it. I got a lot of Trevor Cahill in there.
Cubs legend.
That's incredible.
Trevor Cahill definitely like triple dumps his beef. So I mean, like, hey, I'm on board for that.
2 scoops of jarnar, not just 1.
Yeah,
that's standard.
That is.
To your point though, Ron, about relievers, I do think that that's the Cubs can do that, but I also do think that they need to go get one veteran one and not necessarily pay someone $16 million to be their closer, unless their last name is Kimbrel. If the White Sox decide to, you know, not pick up that option, I think the Cubs, like considering where they'd be at, like I would have a problem if you just did another 1 or 2 year deal with Kimbrel on that, because he was very good at Wrigley Field. I don't know how else to say it. Again, that would be like if you get everything else figured out, then fine. And the only reason I would do it is because I do like Rowan Wick, I do like Cody Hoyer, and I do like, Manny Rodriguez sometimes. And, what's his name? Brad Wick will be back hopefully next year. There's a few other names that I can't think of off the top of my head, but like they have some guys. It's just like none of them have been in a spot where none of them have the experience outside of maybe Rowan Wick, where you're like, you feel good going to the season with that guy.
They're not as established.
Right. So I think that if you go get just one veteran guy, that would be good. But again, I'm not saying it has to be a guy like Kimbrel. I'm just saying, I don't have relievers, free agents up on my.
No, sure. Well, you want that. You want that one guy that's experienced. Well, but you want that one guy that's experienced, right? Like you want that one guy that hey, you've done it for 6 years. I know when we go to you out of the pen, we know exactly what we're getting with you, type guy.
Right.
And I agree with that. I definitely do think they need that at least one guy, and he doesn't necessarily have to be your closer. But as long as you have that one guy that in some high leverage situation, which I think you saw them start to audition I know he's still in here, Buzz. I love Cody Hoyer, so thanks for him. But like they kind of started to do that with Cody Hoyer, right? Like we saw him coming in the 5th inning to get out of jams. We saw him coming in close games. We saw him pitch in the 6th and the 7th and the 8th. I mean, they literally used him all across the board to kind of see like where he fits best. I'm totally cool if they bring in a guy for, $4 million, let's say, a little more established, really good reliever. Again, I don't have names in front of me either. But
I heard Bob Howard is still available.
Yikes.
Wow.
But like someone like Steve Cishek, not him now, but like the signing, it was like a 2-year, $20 million.
Or your boy Cody. Why not bring back Andrew Chafin on that kind of money? Because he was making $2.25 coming into this season. What if you pay him $3.5?
Yeah.
And he's that guy, right? Because he can close a game for you if you absolutely need him to, but he really thrives in kind of that 7th, 8th inning shutdown lefty. And that's a great guy to have in the back of your bullpen.
Right. No, there's a lot of options, and less and less people are spending on relievers these days because they're just developing them. You know what I mean? So, another name that maybe the Cubs have this in mind. I don't know, because I thought he did very well in his starter role. But I mean, Albert Alzolay was lights out as a reliever, as a multiple inning reliever in September. I know the games didn't matter. I know there was no pressure, but I do think that's an idea, especially if the Cubs did want to go out and spend on 2 starting pitchers. But that said, I would rather see Albert Alzolay in the rotation than Justin Steele if I had to choose between the two. Because we've seen Albert Alzolay go deeper in the games more so than Justin Steele. I mean, Justin Steele had his best career start against the fucking Pirates. And now that was a great start. Like, that was good to see. I thought between him and Thompson, he progressed the most in the second half of the season. Okay. There's no doubt about that. And I do think that, if they didn't get a second starter, then I'd be okay with rolling with Alzolay and Steele as your, I guess, 3-4. And then with Mills as your 5. I would be okay with it. Our rotation would go through a lot of ups and downs, but considering what we know, like what we're expecting for next year, I would be okay with it. But if you really want to be competitive and be in the division race next year, like we've already been talking about, you got to get more pitching and you got to get some experience in there. And, go get yourself a Marcus Stroman. And then why not a guy like John Gray, who just eats innings? And you get him out of Coors Field. And I know that sounds just like fucking Tyler Chatwood, but John Gray actually has been good throughout his career. You know what I mean? Bring him to Wrigley. You got your top 3 of Hendricks, Stroman, and John Gray with Steele or Alzolay and Alec Mills. Mm-hmm. And then you can put either Steele or Alzolay in the bullpen to be a multiple inning reliever, which adds depth to the bullpen. And then you can always use him as a spot starter too. Adrian Sampson, another guy they could use as a spot starter, who really just kind of opened my eyes in the second half.
He was very good.
Yeah, because when he came up, I was like, who? You know, so you know, like I think they have some options there. Again, like that you know, maybe John Gray is, you know, kind of like your I keep wanting to go back to comparing 16, but like, you know, maybe like your John Lackey type guy, just an innings eater. Like,
yeah, John Lackey, Jason Hamill, just
like
be
nothing
really
special.
solid.
Take it a step further. If they can reclamate his arm, and he's a Jake Arrieta type, maybe, you know, where you get him away from a place, give him pitch lab, don't you tinker with his stuff or the way that he's sequencing pitches, and then maybe you have that. Maybe that kind of pulls up this timeline. I'm not going to say that he is, but I'm just saying that maybe that's the move, right? You get a guy like that, and you try to keep him here, try to redo some things that he does well, and obviously they've had some success, as we said throughout the whole podcast here, with, you know, having different arms come in and be better after they get in the pitch lab. So yeah, no, I'm with you. I think that's a good move. But
they
need to look at Stroman.
Right. Well, and speaking of the Mets, I mean, I think Noah Syndergaard is also an idea.
I was just about to say that. Thank you, Cody.
And based off, like, you know, recent history where the Cubs have just kind of gone out and fixed guys, like, yeah, some of them haven't worked out. You know, Shelby Miller, God bless his soul, Cubs legend, but goddamn, I don't even think he got 6 outs in his career as a Cub. But, you know, Noah Syndergaard, I still remember 2015, man. Like, he was insane against the Cubs in that series. And I think the biggest issue for him has just been injuries. He's getting up in his career. He's not going to be able to throw upper 90s anymore, probably. But I do think he's worth a chance at a league minimum contract. You know what I mean? Just based off potential. And get him in the pitch lab. Maybe the Cubs can teach him how to pitch. You know, because he would just come up and dominate with the fastball, you know, because he just throws so hard. I think if the Cubs can get him in the pitch lab and maybe tinker around with his mechanics or something, and maybe, you know, put him in a successful spot, he's not a bad run at, you know.
No.
Now, I'm not saying that he should be. I'm not saying he should be like, all right, this is our ride or die guy, because if it doesn't work out, then you're fucked. But like, as a depth guy, I mean, like, that's the biggest thing, is just get some depth in the rotation and the bullpen, because that's how that team in 16 won, man. Like, something like John Lackey, again, big teeth, and made $15 or $15 million a year. He was not that great as a Cub. He really wasn't.
Come here for a haircut.
Didn't come here for a haircut. He just came to hang out and throw every 5 days and just hope and pray to God he didn't give up 1 billion home runs. He would eat you innings, though. Like, that is what he did. Yeah. He would get you 5 innings all the time. It just, sometimes it wouldn't look pretty. That's for damn sure. So, like, that's kind of like what I'm thinking for is the second guy in the rotation with the Cubs outside of Stroman, is just someone who can go out there and just
take
the ball and fucking eat you 5 innings when you need 5 innings, because the guy the day before fucked up and gave up 6 runs in 4.
Yeah, you know, didn't have that this year. That's why it was so bad, right? Because you looked at that bullpen and we talked about how long can this last. Well, it was clear that after the no-hitter, it was like these guys ran out of gas. You know, it was, and then post, you know, going into the rest of the year, you know, they pieced pieces together to see what they had. And a lot of the same guys they rode in the beginning ended up on the injured list. So, I mean, it was clear that, you know, going into that little streak, and even during that streak when they were winning, it was fun. They were winning in walk-off fashion, what it seemed like, you know, every third day. But just the whole, like, they just didn't have, like you said, they didn't have the depth. They didn't have the talent. So that's what they need to focus on. You know, the lineup, like you said, wasn't that bad.
Right. Yeah. Another guy that I'm kind of like intrigued about just to see what his market would be Carlos Rodon. Obviously really good, was an all-star this year, but then the innings pitch caught up to him because he had never done it before at the end of the year. Now, because of that, I'm interested to see what his market would be, especially if he does not pitch well in the postseason. If his market goes down, then that's a guy that I feel like the Cubs should go get on a you know, a decent 2-3 year deal, maybe worth $30 million. I don't know, like Tyler Chatwood deal, like that's.
Yeah, they got to look at his velocity, though. Like his velocity in his last start was, I mean, he was throwing like 90, 91. Like that's for him. He's not a guy who's going to pitch around like that. He needs to be throwing mid-90s.
But with that said, that when you get him and then you I don't say you limit the innings, but I mean, how many times did Rodon just go set like 8 innings plus this year? I'm interested to know that because I just feel like the White Sox, they were playing with house money. I mean, this guy was non-tendered, and then the White Sox ended up signing him back, and they're like, well, we need a guy to eat innings, and, he's always had this potential. We gave him a shot, and it like bloomed into a fucking flower or whatever you want to call it, right? And they just rode it. And Antonio Russa and his old school mindset just didn't think about innings pitched or anything, and here they are with that issue. So I do think that the Cubs would be smart about that. Now, maybe because of this whole injury thing, maybe he's not worth $10 million a year, but there's a lot of potential there. Maybe you get him on a 1 year, prove it. And if he can pitch a whole year without any injury, then like maybe that'll get him a bigger deal. But like he's still young, and like we have seen him at, pitch upper 90s and just be just absolutely nasty against both like hitters on both sides of the plate. Like that, he's someone who has a high ceiling that isn't going to cost you a ton because of the injury scare, no doubt. But that's the same as Noah Syndergaard.
See, I think somebody at the poker table is going to be the sucker who overpays for that guy. They're going to look more or less like they have to make a splash because they're in a franchise that they need a guy like that was in the All-Star game, or maybe they're a lower market team that's trying to contend, and then they overpay. I think both those guys are those candidates. And I think that's like a really difficult market for Ricketts or for Jed Hoyer to evaluate. Also, too, we haven't touched – they need a GM, so it'd be really interesting, too, to see who that hire is and where they're going for that, because they've clearly said they're going out of house for that. So I'm curious if there's been any rumblings, or you have any thoughts both sides on that. I don't, because I clearly don't have any idea who they're even going to be interested in.
No, I have no idea.
I'm intrigued to see what they do with the GM, and just quick touching on it very quickly. I think Syndergaard is intriguing too because he is only 29 years old, so that's just something I wanted to add. But no, I think with the general manager, I think that'll be interesting because I know briefly they've addressed it at least a little bit. They being Jed Hoyer. And I think the biggest reason they want to go out of house, it's not because like they don't trust who's in house, but I think they want to get somebody else's kind of mindset in there.
Eyes.
Yeah,
another
set of eyes. And that's why I'll be intrigued though, because I think they want another set of eyes who can still believe and understand what they're doing. Mm-hmm. But like, hey, how would you make this better? Like, and I feel like whoever comes in with like maybe I don't want to say the best idea, but I guess for lack of a better term in this situation, the best ideas of like how to improve the Cubs model that they've already kind of built within house, the pitching lab and all this type of stuff. I think that's the guy that they ultimately hired to be the GM, because he's gonna mesh with everybody that's already in that front office, but he's still gonna bring that, like we said, that fresh set of eyes onto what they're doing and saying, maybe we can improve a little bit here, or maybe we do this different, or maybe we do this different. And maybe that takes the Cubs model that they developed in-house to a whole nother level. It's something interesting, but I have no idea who's even going to be in the discussions for that.
I'm curious about who it's going to be and what the timeline is, and how much influence does that have on who that person has in mind for signing, for trading. I think the most interesting thing is during the same time that they may be hiring this GM, maybe the same time they're negotiating for a striker net. So are you going to be the team that jumps first and signs this guy, and then maybe you're looming in a strike, and what are you paying for? You know what I'm saying? So
true.
I think the most interesting part is, what's the timeline? And if the timeline's sooner rather than later, does that mean that baseball or the Cubs organization is confident that there will be no strike? Because they clearly have to know how negotiations are going, right? I mean, you're not jumping full bore into a GM if you're not confident that guy's going to be able to do his job next year, are you? I mean, or is it just we're just have to fill the position now? You know what I'm saying? It just kind of it's a rockety timeline because you really don't know. A, is there going to be baseball, which I fingers crossed, pray to God there is, and B, if there is baseball and you are signing this guy, what's the influence he's going to have going in right away? You know, obviously Theo was the czar. He pretty much made the decisions with Jed and, you know, with the organization. But, you know, I'm wondering, do they bring some guy in who's more respected and works more with Jed, so it's more of a group decision, or does Jed still have like final go?
Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's just interesting to me, like how that whole, you know, timeline and the meshing of like who they sign. We'll have a real good idea of how they're going to build a baseball team when they sign that guy, though, because we'll be able to look at, you know, recent moves, recent places he's been, how they've built baseball teams, and we'll have an idea of who they're going to be interested in free agency probably by that.
Yeah.
Who currently is a general manager for the Reds or in the Reds organization? Do they bring him over? Maybe, you know, he really is hyped up about a certain Nick Castellanos joining the Cubs.
Just make Nick Castellanos dad like the GM. Hey.
Yeah. Hey, make his brother the GM.
I would assume it might be someone from the Red Sox or the Padres, just because
of the ties there.
Yeah, the ties. That would be my guess.
Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing, though?
I think if it's from the Red Sox, it's a good thing. I think if it's from the Padres, I stay the hell away from it, though. Just something about that franchise right now is
my argument on that is like you've done that. You know what I mean? And it worked, sure. Like maybe it's time as baseball changes, you have a different outlook on what the game looks like.
You know, somebody from else. Tampa.
Yeah.
I mean,
or the Dodgers, because the Dodgers use the same model just with more money.
Yeah.
Well, same guy.
Well, yeah, Friedman was the one that developed it in Tampa. Then Tampa just kept it going after he left.
So then that's just my thought. Like, are you bringing? Is it a signing for a GM that's just buddy, or is it some guy who's in here
to truly switch shit up?
Look at like what the Bulls did. You know, they brought in Arturis, and then they brought in Eversley right after it. And those guys, they didn't mesh together. They were from two different organizations. You know, that built basketball teams in two different ways.
Yeah.
So,
but both very well respected around the league.
That's what I want, and that's what I want. Get a different whole set of eyes. You did it with Kantrovitz because they brought him in. Now get a whole another set of eyes. That's not from Boston. That's not from. Would I be angry if it's some guy who was on the scouting team for either Boston or the Padres? They're still good at evaluating talent. Trades, maybe a little different, or like evaluating manager talent, maybe a little different. But with that said, I think that, the whole like positive that would come out of having a different set of eyes is a different way of doing things. And I think for Jed, I think that's more valuable because as we've said on here, he hasn't been a GM or a full baseball, operation for very, very long either. He's still learning at this. So I think like all the A+ like talent evaluating type of people you can bring in around him, I think is more or less more beneficial to him. And that's not a knock on Jed. It's just a matter of like the fact that he's doing a job that he's never done before. So having somebody who's a GM that's probably more versed, is probably more beneficial to him.
Yeah. I think that is a really interesting point too, because you look at some of these other models, and Scott, I see your comments in here. He said, give me someone from Tampa Bay. He also mentioned Braylon Marquez having a big year, which I think is something that's intriguing as well. But nonetheless,
he didn't get hurt last year.
Yeah,
it would have been.
That was a big one.
Probably would have came up.
That might
be honest.
One of the maybe that's one of the things. Like if Braylon Marquez has a solid couple months in the minor leagues next year, maybe the Cubs just call him up. Like they called him up in 2020.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Why not?
It's an interesting thing, but especially if the Cubs don't compete for half the year, but then fall out because of youth and not enough talent. Maybe the Cardinals or the Brewers run away with it again or something. Barely might at that point, then you're just kind of well, why the fuck not? Unless you're again. service time manipulation. Like,
Mhm.
you know, I again, if they get that fixed, then you don't have to worry about it. That's why I'm kind of like Brandon Davis should be on the opening day roster next year if the service time manipulation thing gets fixed. So,
Yeah.
you know, like that's just my thoughts on Braylon Marquez. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, the whole GM thing will be interesting. To be honest, it's not even something that I've really been thinking about because I'm pretty content with Jed, and
Sure, yeah.
I'm content with Dan Cantrovis as our director of scouting, and so you got those bright of minds who have already kind of helped the Cubs get in this position, trending up. Then I have really no they would have to pick someone who I've just really never heard of and doesn't have a good track record behind them. That would then at least give me some sort of negative feeling. So in the end, I'm just going to be like, all right, man, well, at least Jed's still making the calls. So like, I don't know. It's tough because when Theo was the guy, I didn't really think too much about Jed Hoyer. I was always just thinking, Theo was the one making the moves. He was the guy.
Right.
So, it is what it is. So, but I guess in a sense, I hope they get a guy that we can all get behind, because one day Jed Hoyer is going to leave and then you got a guy there. I don't know how long Jed Hoyer is going to be at the Cubs. I would lean under 10 years like Theo Epstein. Like Theo Epstein giving you 9 solid years is a lot. And Ricketts wasn't going to even force him out. Ricketts would have let him stay probably forever if he wanted to. So I don't know if that'll be the same for Jed Hoyer, though.
Real quick, you guys think that they're going to strike?
I sure hope not, man.
I hope.
I know we're all hoping here, but realistically,
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised because of how baseball is just like the way they do things. Like,
yep. Agreed.
With all these rule changes and stuff that they just tested last year, and then no one cared that there was a DH for all 60 of those games, and then they decide to remove it again because of a bunch of old white dudes that just don't know how to change. That's my guess, and I'm sorry for all the old people I just offended, but that's just what I'm always going to believe. But they're those things. And the fact that we just they can't get out of their own way year in and year out when it comes to just these stupid issues that they have is the sticky stuff thing this year. Why are we implementing this in the middle of the year? We got guys having we had, how many times did a Cubs reliever go out there and give up 7 runs or something and then come out of the game, and then on their way out they got to get checked for sticky? That's so dumb. And how many times did a freaking position player go out there and pitch and then they still checked him? A position player, the whole that entire thing was so dumb. And that's just a small microism of just how messed up MLB is right now with how they try to fix shit and everything. They just can't get out of their own way. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a strike. And if there is a strike, I will be very sad, because that's just another year of development missed out for guys. And that puts the Cubs back at another year. And it will just be very disappointing.
I'm going to say that they don't strike. And I'm going out on a limb here, strictly because if they strike after what happened with COVID last season, it's a death sentence for baseball.
Agreed.
And both of them know it.
They
literally
have to
meet in the middle.
Afford. Yes, I was going to say they literally cannot afford to strike, because if they strike and you effectively lose more or less 2 seasons of baseball in a 3-year span, especially with sports like the NFL are thriving, sports like basketball on the rise. Even the NHL is gaining ground in the United States. It's getting to a point. I literally was talking to somebody the other day about it, and just the way they said it, I think, is what maybe got me to laugh so much. But they were like, "Bro, the sport they play in Canada nationally is bypassing America's pastime in America."
Yeah,
and I'm like,
we were talking about in the last show, Ron.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I mean, but it's crazy, right? But I love the way he put it though when I was talking to them, because they were like, it's Canada's sport, and it's bypassing America's sport in America. But but that's the reality that baseball faces right now, is because a lot of people hate the way that the MLB does things, as I've all just noted. Everybody thinks Rob Manfred is the worst thing since Roger Goodell. It's amazing that they both exist as commissioners in the same time period, but like that's really what it is right now.
Significantly worse than the other.
Oh, sure.
Like Goodell, he still gets people to want to watch the game. Like Manfred is like doing things that people were like not wanting to watch the game for.
Everybody hates the run around second rule. Everybody hates how ridiculous the shift has gotten. And like, but they're more worried about fucking sticky stuff and like stupid shit like that. But again, and then that's where like you hope guys like Theo Epstein joining the big league office get some of this shit fixed, because it's like, otherwise it's literally, we don't have to sit here and worry about baseball losing popularity because other sports are being better. Baseball will do that by itself, just by the way it's run. They'll just lose people in general because there is no free agent frenzy, and there is no excitement around the offseason anymore because everybody sits around and shrugs their shoulders and goes, well, we ain't going to see any action until the middle of December. You know what I mean? Like when most people, like, again, I'll be the first one to admit it. Obviously, this year's a little different because the whole COVID thing has shifted schedules, but like July 1st every year for me is a national holiday because that's NHL free agency. And it's one of the craziest days of the year in any sport. NFL sees a lot of that too, and that tampering window that they do now effectively, those 3 days are bonkers. You know what I mean? But people get up for that. The NBA free agency frenzy this year, especially for Bulls fans, was fucking electric. You had Ball, DeRozan, and all the other guys joined within a handful of days. Like, people get excited about that when your sport isn't actually playing. Baseball is the only major sport, quote unquote, I call it the Big Four in America, that doesn't have that excitement in the offseason because of all the bullshit and nobody wanting to get paid, and these owners are just probably the most.
It used to be like when the winter meetings came, that
was when
all the deals were going to just blow up. Like I still remember when I was in my apartment when I was in college, and John Lester signed at like 2 a.m. or something like that, or agreed to it at 2 a.m. And me and the two guys I live with in my house, all Cubs fans, we were just going freaking crazy over the Cubs signing John Lester at like 2 a.m. or whatever, like late night. Like there hasn't been anything like that in baseball in recent years. And that, I don't want to say that's the reason why fans just aren't into it anymore, but fuck, man, like at least it was like the one thing in the offseason that would like get you prepared and ready for like spring training. And like the last like 5 years, it feels like it's just been just like walking in mud, just trying to figure out what your team is going to be going into spring training. And there was times where Bryce Harper signed less than a month from spring training. He signed with the Phillies, I thought, something like that in 2018, 2019, whatever year it was. Like that's the kind of shit that that's where MLB really needs to get that shit figured out, and like not put the players in this position where they're like not knowing where they're going to live, I guess, until the beginning of the year and stuff. Like it's dumb. So they got a lot of shit to figure out, guys. And I pray in God they get it figured out and that there's no strike, and, we're celebrating all of that and a lot of fun next year, because I do think if we have a season, they're going to be better than what people expect. I've read so much slander over the last couple months about how it's going to be 5 years. And I'm telling you, I'm keeping receipts and I'm not forgetting. And people are going to hate me. People are going to hate me, Ron.
I'm here for it.
People are going to hate me. I can't wait. I can't wait for people to hate me, because I'm going to be unfucking bearable, because we've, not just me, but we have had to sit through so much pain since July 30th. And we, quite frankly, just did not deserve it. We did not deserve that pain. So when things start to trend up and we figure out this offseason and everything, I'm looking forward to just, letting people know that they're wrong. I really am.
Absolutely. It's going to be a blast. It's going to be a fun offseason. I really think the Cubs are going to do something. I know we all kind of addressed that, throughout the show. I don't think they can afford to sit on their hands and not do something this offseason. It might not be the barn burning, they go and spend, $150 million worth of payroll for one season type shit. But like realistically, I would like to see them add 2, maybe 3 fairly decent sized names. And then, there's nothing wrong with adding some depth guys. Guys kind of what I thought, in terms of this season that they did, guys like Marisnik, guys like Tepera, like those type of guys you need on your team. And like they're going to have to go get a couple of those guys too. But it's certainly going to be something interesting. But gentlemen, as we are at the hour 10 mark here, I do want to turn it back over to each of you. Any final thoughts on the Cubs 2021 season as a whole? Something you're looking forward to this off season, what have you? I'll open up the floor to you guys before we close this thing out with all the pleasantries.
Yeah, spend money, but don't spend stupid money. I think that's like the theme, right? You want to get better this year, but the moves that you make this year shouldn't hamper the future, like one Jason Hayward did in some ways. You don't want another one of those. So I think the smart way is to go about the pitching side of it, because there's a lot of proven pitching if you make the right moves that are in this free agent class. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's the route that they should go. With that said, to close out the season, thanks to everybody, thanks to you guys. And pray to God that Matt Nagy doesn't ruin Justin Fields and the Bears organization, because I can't take much more of this shit, man. Things are not good for us as Cub fans and Bear fans and, city of Chicago sports, like Bulls. Yeah, that's going to be fun. Hawks, I know, are going to be fun, but I mean, near and dear to my heart are the 2 Bears. You got the big Bears and the little Bears, and when they're good, I'm happy. So let's hope that the right moves are made this offseason and we can have a little spark again. It feels like our fire was smoldered. It was just like you just put out. Good word. Right? Good word. Like let's reignite. As Cub fans together. And that sounded like I was leading everybody into war like Braveheart there. But let's win free agency. Right? Be cool to like come back to pregame this season and go, man, like the Cubs really turned it around that quick. I'm excited and, reinvested in the team fully, because I feel like this season in a lot of ways took a lot of the love and the heart out of us, right? We still love it, but they traded away a lot of guys who were near and dear to the success for the last, 6 years. So
absolutely.
Excuse me, guys. But I'm intrigued. I'm excited. But now, as they say on Bears on Tap, it's time to put the meat on the table, Jed Hoyer, and let's get some guys here.
Absolutely. Yeah. Cody?
I think Juice put it all pretty good, man. I mean, again, like I said at the beginning of the show, like it's not the worst Cubs season ever, but it was probably going to be one of the most memorable by the time my days on this earth are done. I'll probably tell my kids about how the Cubs moved on from the guys who won me a World Series, and all that stuff. And it'll be like the Halloween story, I guess, because it's just a horror movie. But I do think the future is bright. Patrick Wisdom was traded for a washing machine. He was traded for a Toyota Prius. He was traded because the Cardinals actually thought Matt Carpenter was worth keeping around after a fluke 2018 season where he was in the MVP race. Matt Carpenter and his salsa is absolutely disgusting. But I appreciate him for eating it because it made him a shitty baseball player. I will never forgive the Colorado Rockies for giving Nolan Arenado away to the most annoying franchise on this God's earth for a washing machine and for a bag of balls as well. I will never forgive the owner in his press conference where he really just did not realize just how dumb of a move that was. Never forget, and that sucks. But on a positive ending, I just want to say that Yadier Molina batted .211, had an on base of .262, and slugged .281 with a 53 weighted runs created against the Cubs this year. All after he blocked me on Instagram because he's a soft serve vanilla ice cream cone who can't take criticism because I didn't even call him a name. All I said was he was wrong on his comments about how he was pissed off that he wasn't in the Gold Glove finalists. He is soft and he is the most overrated baseball player of my lifetime. Today I saw a tweet that had jersey sales, like popular jersey sales for MLB players, and Jacob deGrom was behind Yadier Molina on this list. And that should be illegal. That should be absolutely illegal that more people want to have Yadier fucking Molina's jersey instead of arguably the greatest pitcher of our fucking generation right now. And that's not even a fucking like exaggeration. I don't know if even Clayton Kershaw is better than fucking Jacob deGrom if you look at it over the course of their careers. Clayton Kershaw might have the years behind him, but Jacob deGrom, just from basically since 2015 on, has been the best pitcher in baseball outside of maybe Garrett Cole. But Garrett Cole has the whole sticky stuff thing on him. There was nothing about Jacob deGrom. He is one of the greatest pitchers that we have ever seen. And the fact that more people want to have Yadier fucking Molina's jersey should be everyone who bought a Yadier Molina jersey this year, they should all just be thrown into Lake Michigan face first.
All right.
I'm so happy, that you came prepared with notes for that, because that made it even better. That's the part I probably enjoyed the most. But I feel like it's very appropriate to end the 2021 Cubs season with our Cubs on Tap recap show for the season with a Cody rant of that level. So I am appreciative of said rant. But no, guys, I think you covered it from a baseball standpoint. I think tonight was a great conversation, kind of to put the 2021 season behind us as a whole here at Cubs on Tap. Look toward the future. I think this winter we can all sit here and agree there's a lot of anticipation for. It's going to be a lot of fun. And like Juice said earlier in the show, thank you to everybody that listened this year. We had a huge year of growth here at Cubs on Tap. And we really are appreciative that everybody that joined along, interacted with us, tweeted with us back and forth, listened in on a show, listened to the podcast, what have you. We appreciate it. We'll be back throughout the offseason. We'll be back into next year. And we're just going to keep it rolling here, Cubs on Tap, because that's what we do. We have fun with it. We have our personalities. It's a very diverse group of personalities here that all find a way to mesh very well together. And I'm looking forward to it. But this has been a pleasure, gentlemen, for this season. And we're going to keep it going. We're not done yet. But for one final time on the 2021 season, I do want to remind everybody. You ready for this one?
Oh, buddy. One more time for
the 2020 regular season. But Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast of the On Tap Sports Network. You can go ahead and check out all of our great work over at www.ontapsportsnet.com and at ontapsportsnet on social media. You can follow the pod-specific accounts for here at Cubs on Tap. That is at Cubbies on Tap, Cubbies. That's Twitter and Instagram. I am at Loose on Tap on Twitter. Juice is at Juice on Tap on Twitter. Cody is at Cody on Tap on Twitter. And follow all of our other great contributors at Joe on Tap on Twitter. Notice the brand variety we got going on here. At Joe on Tap, at Marty Laval, at The Riot 326, and everybody else that does a great job contributing here for Cubs. Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, they're all getting ready to be in full swing, as we all just noted. Cody, you're very active, in the gambling space as well. At On Tap Bets, want to drop that in there as well. Be sure to be following along for all the winter sports. I'm very heavy on the Blackhawks. As Juice mentioned, he'll be with the Bulls this season. Cody will be sprinkled in throughout, especially with gambling. So we'll continue to fade Kansas until the end. Or excuse me, we'll continue. Yeah, we're going to fade Kansas.
Fading Kansas until the basketball season.
Fade Kansas until college basketball starts.
They're 1-14 against the spread in their last 15 games or something like that.
There it is.
Perfect. You have to go read my last article.
You will.
Fading Kansas. I keep putting it out there. Keep telling everyone. They are the worst college football program. You fade Kansas until Bill Self is on the sidelines coaching whoever the hell he paid to come play basketball for their school.
There you go.
Nice. And you fade UConn as well. And you can catch all of that once again, like we said, over at www.ontapsports.com and at ontapsports on social media. Like we said, Bears, Bulls, Blackhawks, gambling, we've got it all. And yes, Cubs fans, we all have a friend that's a White Sox fan. You bring them us too, because our Sox on Tap guys do a great job, and they have a postseason to cover coming up here as well. So the On Tap Sports Network, go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago.
Pat Sajak, you're so damn good at that stuff. So
it's just
smooth.
It's just glued into my brain.
Ronnie Loose on Tap.
It's just glued into my brain, man. I think I've said that. I can't even tell you how many podcasts I've been on since On Tap was started. It's been a lot, though.
Sometimes you should just say it backwards. It'd be interesting.
I can't wait though, because in like, I'm going to hear it again in like, a couple weeks, because we got off-season shows coming up.
We do, and they're going to be fun.
Man.
They're going to be fun. We're going to have guests. We're going to be talking about relevant news. It's going to be a blast. I'm actually very excited.
We may just have a show that we just do where we talk about aliens.
Maybe.
Perhaps.
I've been really pushing for an alien show for a while. I don't know if you noticed. I just want On Tap does it. On Tap aliens.
On Tap After Dark will be a new podcast. It's just going to be whatever topics anybody feels like.
After Dark. Oh.
And Juice will get his On Tap Aliens episode, and we'll get that one out of everybody's system. But
On Tap aliens.
On Tap Aliens. We'll talk to the boss man about that one and see if we can get that added to the
aliens on tap. I don't know
the repertoire. I like it. I dig it. No, always good stuff, gentlemen.
Yeah, this is fun.
Yep, always a pleasure. And what do you say, guys? One last time on 2021, we get out here. The only way we know how here it comes on tap.
Let's go Cubs.
Let's go Cubs. Chargers -3.5. I took the under 51.5. Fuck the Cardinals. Fuck Matt Carpenter. Fuck Yadier Molina. And fuck anyone who fucking thinks that Yadier Molina is better than fucking Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, fire Matt Nagy too.
And fire Matt Nagy. Justin Fields forever.
That too. And thank you to everybody for listening. And let's go Cubbies.